Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Admissions Connect. I'm delighted to welcome Jodi, who's the Senior Registrar at Kingston Grammar School this morning. She joined Kingston Grammar School in 2018, and she is passionate at providing high levels of customer service to families throughout the often quite stressful admissions journey. She's really excited about how the challenges that her team faced in the last 20 months, it feels like 20 years, and I'm sure you all do feel the same way, forced them to look at new and innovative ways of connecting and engaging with their prospective students and parents. Just before I pass over to Jodi, just a quick reminder, any questions you have for Jodi, pop in the Q&A and I will ask those on your behalf to Jodi after the presentation. So, Jodi, thank you so much for taking the time to present today and explain some of the ways that you and your team tackled the summer melt. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. So the summer melt. So before I get started, I just want to say I don't profess to be kind of someone an expert on this topic. It's just something that we've been tackling recently, and we've put kind of things in place to handle that, so it's great to share it with you. But obviously we're all a community here, so it'd be great to get any ideas that you guys have at the end in the Q&A, because we can all learn from each other. But I will share with you what we've been focusing on in the last couple of years in managing the summer melt. So what do I mean by summer melt? And probably a lot of you are scratching your heads on that and thinking, what is she talking about? Well, the summer melt, I've actually kind of coined the term really from the American college system, and they use it quite widely. They talk about summer melt and they talk about yield. And summer melt is those candidates that they have accepted places, they paid the deposits, but then they never show up in September. And yield is the number that do. So for us, I kind of have coined the term, and it's something we've been using regularly at KGS for the last year or so. And basically, and it's that slow attrition of acceptances. It's those ones that we get all those acceptances that we've sent out. We've filled our year group. We're all very happy, but then just gradually over the summer, you know, they start to drop off. If you're not in that situation, that's very, very lucky. But I would say the majority of us will experience some form of melt, and usually that will happen over the summer. Some of you will be thinking, well, I've got a wait list. I've got a really lovely wait list. It's very healthy, and I always manage to fill the year group from the wait list. So why should I really be that worried about the summer melt? And I think obviously there will be those out there that can't fill those spaces from your wait list, and that will be hurting your bottom line. But also those candidates that were initially offered, they are your top candidates. They're the ones you really, really want. And yes, there's ones on the waitlist that are really, really great, but this is your alumni network that we're talking about. So if you can hang on to as many of those first choice candidates as possible, the better. And then that will lead to a really fantastic alumni network. And that's what it's all about, really, is kind of, you know, those students that are going out there into the world and us giving them the best opportunities. So what are the 5 main reasons for a melt, as it were? And I'd say the first one, which is the one that's probably the most common, and this is the one that you all probably experience, and it's waitlist releases at other schools. So you'll have your group of candidates, and then as everything starts moving and it has a domino effect across the schools, they start releasing waitlist places, and that's when they come to you, and then you start releasing your waitlist places, and so on. So that's probably the biggest reason. Second one, financial reality sets in. This is a key one. So a lot of parents will be loving the idea of private school and getting the place, and it's all about getting that place. And then they get there, and then they start looking at the finances and start thinking, well, actually, have we thought this through? I'm not sure we can manage this, or do we want to commit to this financially? Third reason, negative experiences. Now, hopefully parents don't have too many of these, but it does happen, and sometimes out of our control. So they can accept, and then if they've had a negative experience between that point of accepting and joining the school, sometimes that can have a huge impact and can actually make them go elsewhere or go to a second choice that they had. Lack of school connection, and this is what I'm probably going to talk about quite a lot in this little session, is if the school's not connected to that family, sometimes they will start drifting. They'll start hearing about their friends who maybe have had that connection with their new schools, and they're thinking, well, why don't I have that? And that's when it starts putting doubts in their mind. Then finally, lack of support and knowledge about the enrolment process. So it can be quite daunting for families moving from a state system, particularly into the private sector. And if they don't have that support on how to do it, and they're getting confused and they're getting overwhelmed by the process, that really can actually put a doubt in their mind as, is this for them? Is this actually really what they want to do? I'd say that there are kind of key touch points as to where the melt can happen across that kind of, from that time of making those offers all the way through to that first day. So I just put a little diagram together just to go through those touch points. The first one is acceptance. So they get their offer, they accept, and sometimes we probably all had this, literally 2 days later they ring up and say, oh, we've made a mistake, actually can we withdraw our acceptance? So that can be not a huge amount, but you will usually find there will be some there. And then there's the deposits. That's the financial commitment. That is when they are actually going to be making that financial commitment to the school and really kind of saying, yes, we're doing this. Now, for some families, that actually isn't a huge issue, but for others, it really is. And that's when it really does make them start to question, as I said, that financial commitment. Next one, enrolment form. So we all have probably a massive pile of information that we need to gather on these new students before they come in. And when we start sending out all those forms and all that information for them to complete, again, can be quite daunting. And they just think, well, actually, I'm not 100% sure about whether they're actually going to go there. It's probably not that worth filling out these forms and going to the trouble of that. Then there's induction. So hopefully by the time we get to induction, you know, that they really are quite invested. But it can happen that if they have a negative induction experience, or they start hearing about other induction experiences at other schools that their friends are having, it can start putting doubts. Oh, have we made a mistake? Is this the right school for my child? And then finally, first day. Again, hopefully those first few days, you're done. But it has happened, and I think I've had one where they come in and they spend a couple of days and they're here, and then they'll move because they've actually been sorting out another school. Not so common. I would say that the biggest area for melt is probably around that deposit and enrolment forms time. For us, that's probably where it lies. Now, this is one of my favourite images. I have it stuck up on the wall. It reminds me of, basically sums up admissions, and I'm hoping that all of you out there can relate to this image. It's actually from a great film by Tina Fey that Tina Fey's in, called Admission, and this is probably where we're all at. I'd say around February. I'd say that's probably where it is. And I think what we need to make sure is there is no point us getting to this stage and deciding to put in some kind of melt plan or plan for the summer to try and hang on to these offers we've made, because as you can see, we won't be in any state to do it at that stage. So it really is something that needs to be planned in advance. So we will start planning this summer for the summer for 2023 of our actual melt plan and how we're going to implement that, because let's face it, no one wants to be doing it when they're at that stage. So let's get down to it. My first thing that we kind of started to think about was building a community earlier. I think this is really, really important. So the sooner that family feels connected and supported by the school, the less likely they are to melt. And I think this is really, really important. And I think in the past, we would send out our offers, we'd get our acceptances, and then there would be this short gap where we didn't really speak to them until we were ready to send out enrolment forms, and we didn't really engage with them. And I think it's really important, actually, that never stops. You as soon as you can get them to make a connection with the school and to feel part of that community, the less likely they are to melt away. Before you put that in place, and before we do any of the things that I'm about to say, you need to know your demographic. So, for example, for us in kind of Southwest London, we have probably a mixture at the moment of millennial families and Gen X families, and looking at that kind of demographic. The millennials, they like to feel commitment from the brand. They like to develop a relationship. So this community building is really, really important to those millennial families. Gen X, they're seeking that work-life balance, and I think they're also kind of seeking that for their child as well. So you've got to make sure that in your communications with them, and this is what we focus on, is making sure they see the fun side of the school as early as possible. And it's not all academics, it's not all filling forms, it's not all, actually, let's get them to see the fun they're going to have when they're here. One of the things we did this year, very small, very easy to do, is we assigned students to houses almost immediately. We'd already done this a bit later in the summer usually, but this year we thought, no, actually that house is a really important part, and hopefully most of you will have a house system. Getting them into that house immediately makes them feel a part of a family. It builds on that relationship. It adds that extra connection to the school. So we thought, right, okay, we're going to assign them really early. And we're not just going to assign them to houses, we're actually going to do a big reveal of their house, make it really important. So we created house reveal videos. It sounds like it's expensive, but it really, really isn't. We used, I think I used Animaker, but there's many animation video software companies available out there where you can just pay like a monthly fee, a monthly subscription just to use that. And you can just use it for a month, and that's it. And so we created a video. It basically had a few animations saying which house are you going to be in, and it had kind of lots of pictures of the different houses. And then it was the big reveal, you're in Woolworth, and there were balloons and confetti. And then we had video from our head of house talking about why it's amazing to be in Woolworth House. These videos were sent out to families, and we had such a good response to this video. And I really do think it's one of the reasons that our kind of summer melt was reduced this year, was that immediate connection and immediately feeling part of the family. And it was fairly easy to do, it wasn't too complicated. Other things, we sadly couldn't do this year because of COVID, but we'd planned to have a picnic on our sports field, where we would invite all the new first years in, but we also invited all the current first years, so the ones that had been through the process last year, and they were actually also their buddies, and I'll talk a bit about buddies a bit later. And the picnic was going to be set up in different house areas, something we have used before in the past and works really, really well. And you will have a picnic area for a particular house, so you go and sit in that house area to have your picnic, and then that automatically leads you to making friends with the other families. The children start making connections and start going off and playing, and by the end of it, they're usually all part of some friendship group on their phones. And so that was a really good way of building that community as much as early as we could. The other thing a little bit, and I'll talk a bit more about it later, but is the use of class list or something similar. So hopefully you might be aware of class list. If you're not, look it up, it's fantastic. And it is a way of connecting parents together. You could do it similarly with something like a Facebook group, so class of 2023 Facebook group, but it is similar to that, but it's an app, and they can communicate with each other and other children in their class, and start organising kind of events and things for themselves outside of school. So that's really a lovely option. So building that community earlier, really, really quite important. The next thing, which kind of leads on from that, is improve communication. Some of you might be sitting there going, well, my communication is fantastic, I don't need to improve communication. You can always improve communication. And I say that without any hesitancy. Communication and the methods of this that are available out there, and the ideas and the experiences are changing every day. And if you can just keep on top of those, and when that spam email that keeps coming into your email because they've worked out that you might be interested in this, don't necessarily just keep deleting that spam. Do just have a quick flick through and see if there's anything interesting, and you might just find something that's a bit new, a bit innovative, and a new way of communicating. And it's just really important, just keep working on that, keep improving it. You need to consider your students that have accepted places as warm leads. They're not converted. In my mind, when I get those acceptance forms, they are not converted. I'm not done. They are warm leads. So the communication that we send out, good communication is a differentiating factor in engaging those families and giving them a sense of belonging to the school. It's absolutely key. As soon as that family apply to you from a business point of view, you're beginning a relationship with them, and it's incredibly valuable that you've already got that existing relationship. They're invested, they're interested, but what you can't do is just leave them in the dark, because that relationship will just dwindle away. You need to keep that relationship going. Over COVID, we've had a real chance to kind of pivot and start looking at whole new ways of communicating, and hopefully a lot of you have explored those methods. So there's physical and digital channels that we can use to communicate with families, and I kind of urge everyone to explore both of those. So obviously the simple ones, email updates. plan them in advance. Don't try and kind of just do them. And I'll touch again on this a little bit later about why it's important, but make sure that you're not just kind of sending things out spare at the moment. But obviously email updates is quite good. However, there is research to say, and we haven't done this yet, but it's something that we will be probably looking at, is they're saying, you know, parents not necessarily checking the emails as much as they were before. They're more reliant on kind of social media, and it probably even something like text message or WhatsApp, something like that. So if we can get communication out to them in that way, you'll probably find you'll reach a much wider spectrum. Virtual tours, hopefully you've all kind of done something, even if it is just walking around your school with a mobile phone, but giving them that chance to have a look. Obviously, if you can get them in person, that is a lot better, I feel. They just want to get a sense of the atmosphere. But if they can't, if that's not possible, try and have a virtual option available as well. I mean, I think we've done, you know, we've had the 360 tour done, which is all done very professionally, but we've also found that just kind of walking around with a mobile phone with someone and recording the school and walking around as if you're a student, something that doesn't cost any money at all, and doing some very basic editing on it, that is enough for these parents that can't quite get to the school just yet. So really do think about using that method. One-to-ones with families, you know, you've accepted these students, they are going to be investing a huge amount of money in the school, and you have to think of yourself as a luxury product. You think about how much money they are actually spending, and in any other kind of world, they'd be getting a glass of champagne when they walk through the door when they're spending that much money on something. So that, obviously, we're not going to be offering champagne, but I think you need to start thinking, or we decided to start thinking about it in that respect. This is a luxury thing, so we need to try and offer them those one-to-one meetings with families if we can, or an online version, or put them in touch with the teacher that they want to speak to, or the head of department. Then the other thing, think about when you're communicating to these families, is to think about influence the influencer. So when making that decision about the school they're going to, who is the real influencer there? And I think a lot of the time it's the student. There will be some families that are like, no, you're going to the school. That's the school that I've chosen for you. But a lot of the times those students will have a huge influence on that decision. And although the parents might have accepted that place, the child might, you know, their friends might be going somewhere else, and they might put quite a bit of pressure on the family. So actually, Mum, I really don't want to go there. I want to go somewhere else. And they can have a huge impact. So make sure that you are also catering for them. As I mentioned before, make sure they see the fun side of the school as early as possible. But when you're doing your communication, when you're setting up things, make sure that it's geared towards them as well. It's not just all aimed at the parents. We tried to do what we call a summer nudging campaign last year for our communication, to try and keep those lines of communication open and that conversation going over the summer, where we kind of set intervals. We sent out not a newsletter, it was almost like a fact sheet, and what we did is it had a who's who, so it introduced a member of staff, it would have a fun fact about the school, like how many Olympians we produced. Then it would have something about something that's happened recently, some award that someone had received, and then something else I can't remember. But it was like a fact sheet, and it was really fun. And the students, we found, obviously through analytics and looking at who was looking at it, they engaged with that a great deal. So that was really good at kind of keeping them thinking about the school and not letting it just kind of slip away. I can talk about communication for ages, but I haven't got enough time, so I will move on to my next slide. Get your students involved. Again, really quite important. So your biggest and best, most trusted advocates are your current students. Well, I hope they are. I'm hoping you're all sitting there going, yes, 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 they definitely are. And not sitting there going, oh, well, hopefully they are. Try and get them involved. It's not easy to use your students, but there are a few things that we do. And again, at the end, if anyone's got any other ideas about how to engage and involve the students in it, then please do share. We have buddies immediately that we set up. So we assign our current first years a buddy for a new first year. They write to them, and you can either do this via letters or by email, depending on kind of the setup of that and permissions. But setting up e-pals is quite a nice way of doing it, as long as you've got permissions from both sides. or handwritten letters, make a connection. So the first years tell them a little bit about their experience and what not to worry about and top tips for starting in September. The picnics that I mentioned earlier, where we had our first years, or we were meant to have our first years there, to kind of be in the house areas and start to make friends with the new first years and give them advice, and kind of set up areas where they could come and chat to some of our current first years. We've done a lot of filming with mobile phones. So no professional, we have done some professional filming, but we've done a lot of us just putting groups together and filming with our phones. And I pulled some first years out a while back, and I just asked them what it felt like the day they got their offer letter. And I just videoed a lot of them just giving me some answers. And I got some great, candid answers. And I think that's something to be wary of. Is, yes, it's lovely to have your shiny, glossy videos and photos of the school, but it's not that relatable to a lot of these students, and they want to see reality. They want to see what it's going to be really like when they get there, and giving them those little glimpses of real first years that have just been through it, and getting what seems and what is genuine to them. It's not a child reading from a script. I hate scripts. It's my biggest bugbear over the last year and a half. Doing a lot of virtual events, so it is people reading from scripts. And I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy for people, and you might have staff where you're like, I can't video them. I can't let my students go off script. I just can't do it. Give it a go and trust them. You will get some material that you just can't use, and it's quite funny. But if you just try it, you'll get those golden moments where they say something absolutely beautiful. And I've had students say, oh, it was just the best day of my life. And I had a student say, and I'd like to thank my mum and dad who supported me through the exam process. And little things like that I just couldn't have scripted. They come out. So do be brave. Go off script, get those candid, real, genuine moments. Try and get them of your current first years and share them with the incoming group. It will help them connect. My next one, engage your families on social media. So I have touched on this briefly already, but I think it's really important that we try and meet these families where they spend the majority of their time, which is online, especially in this new world that we're living in. The majority of them are there. The students are online, the parents are online. So we need to meet them there. So we need to kind of use that technology that's available and to build those kind of opportunities to bring them in to the community of our school via their smartphones. It's fantastic. It's something that I wouldn't have even considered, putting too much effort in a few years ago, but now we can, and it's really quite simple and easy to do. Again, avoid those lovely glossy photos. Obviously, you have to have them at some point. When you're trying to engage these parents that have accepted, they've committed to the school, they've seen the glossy photos, they've seen the brochures, now they want to know what it's really like. So give them that kind of looking glass into the day of a school. Do live streams of a club or do live streams of a school play. So we usually, if you can, obviously invite them in to watch the school play, but if not, live stream that play, obviously with the right permissions, but make sure they can see this is the junior play, you could be doing this play next year. And usually that's a great way of getting them engaged and building another one of those connections. Short videos on Instagram. I talked about getting your students involved before, just talking to staff, talking to students. Get really short videos, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, about why they love the school, what they love most about the school, top tips on how to survive those first few weeks as a first year, whatever you can do. But you want to get this stuff filmed as early as you can, get it already, so you're not doing it when you look like you did in that photo that I showed you earlier. Class list again, meet them online. Class list, if they can all connect via some kind of app, again, it could be a Facebook group, it doesn't have to be class list, but create a kind of class of 2023 group. Get those parents connected, start them talking together, building those friendships, building those connections that they're less likely to break. Competitions. Some of you might already do this. We run an art competition throughout the summer, but we can do trivia quizzes on social media, offering simple prizes. Our headmaster, I know from our current pupils, but he's done it with other pupils as well. He's run competitions before online and run quizzes. Live events, students showcasing their work. You know, sixth formers maybe do a showcase of work sixth formers have done, but get the sixth formers to run it. Don't get the staff to do it, the sixth formers, and hopefully, you know, by the time they get to sixth form, they're kind of young adults that we are proud of, and they'll be really excited to actually sit down and maybe DT, for example, design technology, get them to showcase some of their work, art, get them to showcase some of their work. And you can do this all online. It doesn't have to be a big event. It doesn't have to be something that costs a fortune or takes too much time, but just try and meet those families online as well as in person. Now, this one, identify warning signs. Now, this is something that kind of working in missions for quite a long time, you get a bit of a sixth sense as to when a parent or a family is starting to melt. And I think in the past, I've probably just gone, oh yeah, I think they're probably going to withdraw. And that's it. That's all I've done. I've kind of gone, oh yeah, they've done this. So I think they're probably going to withdraw. It shouldn't really end that. Actually, we should be speaking to these families. We should be making notes of these warning signs and going, actually, you know, maybe someone from the team needs to give this family a call. I go back to that luxury service. I go back to, you know, the money that they're paying. We should be able to kind of give them a call. Everything okay? Do you need any help with this? Would you like to come in for a chat? Is there anything we can do? Catch them early before they melt too much. The warning signs. First one, absence of communication, not replying to emails. This is probably the most common one that I notice. And when I get very kind of a bit fidgety around when we've sent out our new starter forms and we've given them a strict deadline and they're not. There's a few families where those forms just aren't coming back in. There's been no emails from them. We've not had any communication from them. They're probably having doubts. And again, definitely worth making some form of contact with that family. Checking terms and conditions. You might have this. You might have a family that kind of, oh, can you just send me another copy of the terms and conditions, very casually, or you know, just maybe checking something. Oh, can I just check what the deadline is to withdraw for the deposit? Make a note of these families. It's worth giving them that little bit of extra attention. Not returning forms, as I mentioned before, that absence of communication, getting to that deadline and those forms not being completed, you're chasing them, they're just not getting back to you, those forms aren't coming in, they're trying to delay that as long as possible for a reason. Limited knowledge of the school, this is a little bit more vague, this one, but you know, when you have your new parent evenings and you know, they might just not be that interested in the school, they might not really know anything. There are some families out there in a very lucky position to be able to accept 3 schools and pay 3 deposits and not be really that bothered about losing them. So they might just kind of make their acceptances and then start to research the schools, then start to visit them and think, I'm going to make my decision now. And you can sometimes kind of pick that up in conversations with them. Parents are particularly difficult. Now we all have these. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to melt, of course, because sometimes that is just part of what we do. But again, make note of it. Careful how you make note of it, but do somehow make a note of it, and just be wary of it, because if they're just giving the impression that they just don't want their child to come to the school yet they've accepted, they're likely to pull out at a later stage because they're waiting for that waitlist offer from another school. Talk to them, see if there's anything you can do to bring them around, give them that one-to-one attention, give them what they need, because you could possibly turn them around. They may just be honest, and you may have a family, and I love these families that say to me, do you know what, we're accepting, but we are actually waiting for a place and we want a wait list for the school down the road. And that's great, and that's great, and I love the fact that they're honest, and that they feel like they can be that honest with me. But what I mean, how many times have we been in that situation where we've got a family on the wait list, they're ringing us every day saying, please offer us a place, we're desperate to come to your school. A couple of months down the line, we ring them up and go, great news, we've got an offer for you, little Joey can come. And they go, oh, do you know what, he's actually kind of, you know, really looking forward to going to his other school now, and he's met some of the other kids in the class and he's had a few events, and I think actually we're going to stick with the other school. Hopefully a lot of you can relate to that, and that other school have done a fantastic job. They've basically done what I've been talking about, and I think that's what you can do. These parents that tell you you're not necessarily their first choice and they're waiting on a wait list, make yourself their first choice, and you can do that. It's not kind of just accept that they're going to take this other school if they get it. Last one, I promise. Focus on one thing at a time. I think this is quite key. We have a lot of information to get out to these parents, and They have a never-ending to-do list, from buying uniform to managing finances to signing up to music lessons to clubs. It's a full summer's worth of work, and I think it can be very daunting, and overloading parents with information. It can be quite hard on them. And I think, although I've talked about improving communication, that doesn't necessarily mean email them every other day with a little thing that they need to do. Take it one step at a time and plan it out. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you've got to meet them where they are again. So when I said earlier, meet them where they spend most of their time is online, but meet them where they are. From a timeline point of view, really work out what information do they need and do you need right at that point. And that's all you should be asking from that family. If there's information you don't really need until a month later, don't ask for it yet. If you ask for everything all in one go, or over lots of little different emails over a space of a week, you're going to overload these families. So you need to really plan it. And that is probably one of the key things, that you need to plan that year in advance. Plan out all the information that you need to get out to these parents. When should it be going? And how can I make it concise and easy for them to manage? Timelines for parents. Parents love a timeline. So give them that timeline of, I'm going to need this at this date, this date, this date, checklists that they can work from, and give them that a kind of transparent method, a transparent timeline of getting all that information back to you, and when and where it all needs to be done by. So just one thing at a time, and don't give them the whole bale of hay, as it were. So just to kind of wrap up then, I've touched on quite a lot of things. Hopefully some of those have given you a little bit of a few little sparks of ideas of what you can do. But to wrap up, build a community earlier, make them feel connected to the school, start making those connections with other families, with staff, with other students. Improve your communication. Whether you think you've got amazing communication or not, there is always a way to improve it. Plan it. Don't overload people. Plan it so it's going out at the right time. Get your students involved. As I said, they are your best advocates, and in any way you can, get them involved. Get the influencer, which in kind of our area, I would definitely say is the child. And if you can get them to make a connection and get them excited and looking forward to joining your school, that will influence the parents. Engage your families on social media. That is your biggest and best tool, is social media. Little videos, not just pretty glossy pictures, little videos, quizzes, anything you can do, but just keep social media and get a plan in place. Identify those warning signs, don't ignore them. If they come in and you see a family and you're thinking, yeah, I think they're going to pull out, don't just say to your colleagues, yeah, I think they're going to pull out. Make a note of it. Is there anything I can do to turn them around or to kind of stop them getting to that point? Focus on one thing at a time. And again, we've just touched on this, but don't overload these parents. Meet them where they are on a timeline perspective. So make sure that you have a clear process out. I'm going to give them this information then, and I'm not just going to be sending out ad hoc emails as and when I think, oh, I need that from that parent, I'm going to send it out. Give them checklists, give them timelines, make sure it's a really clear process. Just going to finish on a quote from Sir Richard Branson. Succeeding in business is all about making connections. I think this is really apt, and I cannot stress this enough. When those parents send in their acceptance forms, there is a thread of a connection. They are hanging by a thread. It is your job from that point to add threads. Just keep adding to it, make more and more connections, and it will be harder for it to break. And you can't just rely on that thin thread of a connection, and you can't just leave families in the dark. Be nimble, be ready to change. I think we've all learned this over the last, after the last year and a half to 2 years. There's always new ways, new exciting things. And I also think kind of your senior management team, your senior leadership team, hopefully now are a lot more open to ideas. So it should be able to take new things to them, look at different ways of communicating, look at different videos and things you can do, but just be nimble, be ready to change. There's no playbook. The playbook is out the window now for admissions, and we are just kind of changing all the time. Reevaluate every year. So the first year will be the hardest, putting this MELT plan, as it were, in place. That will be the hardest because there's everything I've touched on, or everything you want to do, you've got to get done from scratch. Each year after that, hopefully you're just building on it, but you need to reevaluate it. What worked last year? What didn't work last year? What has come out technology wise this year that we could actually, that's new and exciting, that we could reintroduce to this? Don't just assume that those parents that have accepted your school are converted. I think that one of the kind of key messages is think of them as warm leads and keep building those connections with them. Hopefully that has been useful, but I will hand back over to Tori now to see if you guys have got any questions or would like to share anything.
Thank you very much, Jodi. We do have some questions here. That was a really comprehensive presentation, and I'm really grateful for all that you put into it and everything that you've told us about what you've done. You've been very open and very frank, and that's really helpful for everybody. I've got 2 or 3 questions here if you're happy just to take those. Can I ask whether assigning to a house at such an early stage as you mentioned earlier ever causes issues if a family doesn't accept, i.e. does it an evenness of numbers in your house?
Of course, yeah, and that was one of my biggest concerns when I first pitched it to my line manager, and she went, what's going to happen when that, and I think it was a risk that we were prepared to take, and what we said was, this is part of building those communications, which is hopefully going to reduce those numbers of people pulling out, which is going to hopefully stop the imbalance. The majority of people pulling out usually, for us, usually pull out after we've assigned houses anyway, kind of, later on down the line. It wasn't a problem this year for us, actually. We had a bit of an imbalance, but it just wasn't a huge difference, the way we kind of managed it, and it worked out quite well. What we did have as well is we actually had a couple of parents who asked to switch houses, so we had a bit of movement anyway, and it is always hard to keep them balanced. So I think the benefit of assigning them early and giving them actually outweighed the risk of it being really drastically overbalanced. If out of the blue you did suddenly realize that everyone in one house pulled out, I think then you could always contact people and say, is there anyone that would be willing to change? Now, we've not done that. That's not a proven thing. That's just something that I had in the back of my mind that I would use as a backup plan if the worst happened. But it didn't. It is a risk. It absolutely is a risk, and it's one that you kind of have to decide whether or not you want to take. We did take it this year, and it was very successful.
Thank you for that. The next question is, when do you gather permissions for inclusion in a class list or Facebook community group, and what ongoing responsibility do you have for those once they're set up, and are you having to monitor and moderate the activity?
Of course. So what we do with class lists, we don't use Facebook, we use class list, is actually run by our PSA or kind of other schools' PTA. So it's actually run outside of the school, it's run by parents. And we make that very clear to our families that this isn't a school app, it's not managed by the school, we're not involved in it at all, it's run by our PTA and it's run by our PSA, our parents. What happens is when we send out our kind of the acceptance documentation, we ask them if they would be happy to join it. And instead of us adding them to class list, they receive an invite directly from class list. So they've given us permission to invite them. So we put their email address into class list, and then they receive an invite from class list. And that is when they themselves give the permission to join the app. It's their choice to join it, and it's nothing to do with us. We're not putting them into the app, we're not managing the app, we're not monitoring their data. It's all managed by other parents, and we're very transparent about that, so that when parents sign up, they are agreeing to share their email address with other parents. They are agreeing to tell other parents which class their child is in, and we actually have a 99% sign up rate for that. So it's actually a really successful tool. I think when we first introduced it, it was a bit harder, and we've actually had it for quite a long time, but it was a bit harder, and we had to do a lot of work with PSA, kind of emailing parents and saying, please join class list. But now it's kind of a given, and because that is the way that they connect with other families before they join the school, then they're very keen to join. What I would say is we have to keep it separate. So you've got a class list for current pupils, and then you've got a class list group for the new incoming class. And that is very much a separate account to the current pupils until they enroll, because if they are part of the current school, they will be able to see details of students that are currently in the school, and we can't do that until they're actually here. So we do keep those two separate. We have the class list for current pupils, and then we have class list for the incoming group, and they all agree to talk to each other. Once they enroll, we then shift those over to the current pupil class list. But do be careful about and make sure you check what permissions they have when they come in, because you don't want the new people that aren't at the school yet to be able to see students that are currently here.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Just one here, what was the animation company you mentioned when announcing their houses?
Sure, I use a company called Animaker, that's Animaker. There are loads though, and it kind of depends on your budget and on what you want to spend, but a lot of them will have kind of monthly subscriptions, and you can just sign up for a month. A lot of them aren't kind of yearly contracts. Some of them are, the more professional ones are, but this one, I think Animaker, I just signed up for a month, used it to make my videos and then didn't do it again, and it really wasn't that expensive at all. You'll need someone that's a little bit kind of savvy with things like that, but it's not too hard. It's very kind of drag and drop. So they have most of these companies will have a kind of list, a library, as it were, of animations, of pictures and images, and you can just drag and drop them in. You set up a little timeline and play that animation. And it will take a little bit of playing, but it's really worthwhile. I mean, the house videos that we had were lovely, and it had like a banner that dropped down and the house came up and balloons and confetti came down, and it was really nice. The kids really, really loved it. So Animaker, but there are lots and lots out there.
Thank you. Next question is quite long, this one is, when you say engage families on social media, and in particular with real non-glossy insights into the school, is this on the same profile as the accounts that you are trying to encourage new applicants, or is this a separate channel for parents to follow? E.g., do you have a glossy and non-glossy social media?
Yeah, do we have our glossy ones that we save for perspective? I think we kind of think of ourselves as quite a down-to-earth school, and so we're quite happy to share the real stuff as well as the glossy stuff. You need to have a good balance. So I think a lot of the videos and things that we shared actually went out to everybody. It wasn't just to our opposite pupils. We did set up a web page on our website for the incoming class, so that was only accessible by our new students. So a lot of the videos went on there as well, and there was a couple of other little things that we put on there that we only really wanted them to see, that we didn't really want to put out on social media, but it was only a couple of little things, not much, that was just reserved for them. I think prospective families like to see us welcoming in the new cohort, because they kind of think, well, oh, we want to be part of that next year, and they like to see the real life experience of the school.
Thank you. And just a little bit on the same lines, when you want to engage with prospective families, how do you do that and follow them or get them to follow you on social media? And can you identify them once they follow, and are you identifying them?
Well, I don't do, our marketing team do the analytics, and I don't think they can necessarily identify them, but obviously we monitor our analytics regularly and daily and see how many new follows we've got and people, and you can usually, we do some kind of, if we do a push out on a social media, we can tell how many people are clicking on that video, we can tell how many people are viewing it. And then also in our webpage that we set up specifically for new starters, and that we've only given that link to those new starters, again, I can see how many people are viewing those videos. They're normally YouTube videos that we've embedded, and there's some great analytics on that. So I kind of go in, and I think once, and only a few people have watched it, and then the next day I see like over 150 had watched it, so it was great. But I can't necessarily specifically say that it's that individual person that's watching it. But if you want to keep track of just the new starters, maybe do something like a Facebook group that is class of 2023 and ask them to sign up to it and give permissions when they do, or have a dedicated web page on your website specifically for those parents to go to, which you can continually update and add information to. We actually added all our new starter packs to that web page this year, so it was all digital, so parents just went to their dedicated web page and it was all there in issue documents ready for them to view. engaging, I mean, engaging on social media, as I said, we did a countdown to the start of term. So it was 7 days to go. Have you checked all your uniform? And then day 6, it was, 6 days to go. Have you got your homework space set up ready for September? Those kind of things. And we just put those out to everyone on social media, but directed at our new class. And so it was very clear that we were talking to our new students that were joining us in September. And we did find that, when speaking to parents and emails and things to parents, they did really appreciate that. And it was mentioned quite a lot in that communication.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting. Do you do anything specific for pupils that are the only ones coming from a primary or a prep school?
I would say the majority of our students are the only ones coming from their primary school. So we have I think we've taken a cohort of 125. Last year, I think I had over 80 different schools that they were joining from. A lot of them are the only ones. We do have some clusters from some local schools. All our students are split into different classes. If they are coming from the same school, they will go into a different class. Obviously, if we've got more, then we will try and kind of work it out. But we try to put everyone in the same boat. We try to make sure everyone is going to be the only one coming from their school. So because the majority of them are for us, we don't really need to have to do anything specific. We just have to make sure that we have a great induction program. So as I mentioned, we have, I don't know, did I mention other picnics? So we would normally have a picnic. That's a great way of getting them together. We get them in for familiarisation afternoons. So they come in and meet each other. And we're very clear on them. We try and tell them that all the time, the majority of children will be the only one from their school. So they know that they're not a kind of, an anomaly, as it were. They know that the majority of the other children coming are in the same boat. But so I don't think we've had the need to do anything specific for them, because it's majority of them are in that boat. So everything we do is for them.
Thank you. Just going back a bit to the class list thing, I've just got a note here saying, at what point do you switch them? Do you switch them from the prospective class to the current classes on the first day, or do you give them a few days and then move them?
It's on the first day. I speak to the PSA and we work quite closely together on it. And so as soon as they're enrolled at the school, they've turned up, they've been registered, we know that they're here, they're at the school, they are then a current pupil, which means they can have access to the current pupil account, and we move them over then. So yes, it is that first day for us. Obviously, that's in an ideal world. I might get in on the first day and have an absolute nightmare because I've got so much work to do, so it might happen the second day. But the aim is always to have it done as soon as they've enrolled and turned up for that first day.
Thank you. And one last question here. What social media platforms do you use at Kingston Grammar?
So we use Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I would say they are our main ones. I think we do a little bit on LinkedIn, but mainly Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we use them differently for different messages. So I'm not actually hugely involved in that. We have a marketing team, but I do work with them. And I would say obviously Instagram and Twitter. So Twitter is probably our biggest one, because that's great for short, sharp little messages, those kind of little quick videos that I mentioned before, get those out on Twitter. That seems to be our best one. But if we're doing a slightly bigger campaign and we want to put a slightly bigger video out, we'll push that out onto Facebook. And that tends to get a better reaction. I'd say if you're trying to connect with the parents, Facebook is a great way, but Twitter is the one we're gearing towards. Instagram is probably more about the kind of looking beautiful, colourful, bright pictures. It's all about the visual on Instagram, whereas Twitter is probably more about those quick videos, those messages that we're getting out. So I'd say there are three main ones. But as I say, I'm not kind of marketing, I'm more admissions, but I do work with them on it.
Thank you. Jodi, thank you so much for giving up your time this morning and giving us so many tips, ideas, thoughts, suggestions. As I've said, it has been a very, very different 20 months. I mean 20 months, not 20 years. And I think you're absolutely right. We have been moving, changing, switching, but it's, you know, you've found innovative ways now to go forward, and you've taken those forward, and I think a lot of us will feel the same way. So thank you very much indeed, Jodi. Thank you to everybody who's been on here listening to Jodi, and we will see you for the next product showcase at 12 o'clock and the second webinar at 2:30 this afternoon. Thank you, Jodi. Thank you, everyone. See you all again soon. Thank you.